Good evening and welcome back to another episode of The Longing, where today we are going to be continuing to read The Golden Age by Kenneth Grahame. So, let's get going. Following on these bracing incentives came a dull blank period of unrewarded search. In vain I removed all the drawers and felt over every inch of the smooth surfaces, from front to back. Never a knob, spring, or projection met the thrilling fingertips, unyielding the old bureau stood, stoutly guarding its secret, if secret it really had. I began to grow weary and disheartened. This was not the first time that Uncle Thomas had proved shallow, uninformed, a guide into blind alleys where the echoes mocked you. Was it any good persisting longer? Was anything any good whatever? In my mind I began to review past disappointments, and life seemed one long record of failure and of non-arrival. Disillusioned and depressed, I left my work and went to the window. The light was ebbing from the room, and outside seemed to be collecting itself on the horizon for its concentrated effort of sunset. Far down the garden, Uncle Thomas was holding Edward in the air reversed, and smacking him. Edward, gurgling hysterically, was striking blind fists in the direction where he judged his uncle's stomach should rightly be. The contents of his pockets, a motley show, were strewn the lawn. Somehow, though, I had been put through a similar performance an hour or two ago myself. It all seemed very far away and cut off from me. Westwards the clouds were massing themselves in a low violet bank. Below them, to the north and south, as far round as eye could reach, a narrow streak of gold ran out and stretched away, straight along the horizon. Somewhere very far off, a horn was being blown, clear and thin. It sounded like the golden streak grown audible, while the gold seemed the visible sound. It pricked my ebbing courage, this blended strain of music and colour, and I turned for a last effort, and fortune thereupon, as if half ashamed of the unworthy game she had been playing with me, relented, opening her clenched fist. Hardly had I put my hand once more to the obdurate wood, when, with a sort of small sigh, almost a sob, as it were, of relief, the secret drawer sprang open. I drew it out and carried it to the window to examine it in the failing light. Too hopeless had I gradually grown, in my dispiriting search, to expect very much. And yet, at a glance, I saw that my basket of glass lay in fragments at my feet. No ingots or dollars were here, to crown me the little Monte Cristo of a week. Outside, the distant horn had ceased its gnat song. The gold was palling to primrose, and everything was lonely and still. Within, my confident little castles were tumbling down like card-houses, leaving me stripped of estate, both real and personal, and dominated by the depressing reaction. And yet, as I looked again at the small collection that lay within that drawer of disillusions, some warmth crept back to my heart as I recognized that a kindred spirit to my own had been at the making of it. 2 tarnished gilt buttons, naval apparently, a portrait of a monarch unknown to me, cut from some antique print and deftly coloured by hand in just my own bold style of brushwork, some foreign copper coins, thicker and clumsier of make than those I hoarded myself, and a list of birds' eggs with names of the places where they had been found. Also a ferret's muzzle and a twist of tarry string, still faintly aromatic. It was a real boy's hoard, then, that I had happened upon. He too had found out the secret drawer, this happy-starred young person, and here he had stowed away his treasures, one by one, and had cherished them secretly a while. And then, what? Well, one would never know now the reason why these priceless possessions still lay here unclaimed. But across the void stretch of years, I seemed to touch hands a moment with my little comrade of seasons long since dead. I restored the drawer with its contents to the trusty bureau, and heard the spring click with a certain satisfaction. Some other boy, perhaps, would some day release that spring again. I trusted he would be equally appreciative. As I opened the door to go, I could hear from the nursery at the end of the passage shouts and yells, telling that the hunt was up. Bears, apparently, or bandits, were on the evening bill of fare, judging by the character of the noises. In another minute I would be in the thick of it, in all the warmth and light and laughter. And yet, what a long way off it all seemed, both in space and time, to me yet lingering on the threshold of that old world chamber. Exit Tyrannus. The eventful day had arrived at last, the day which, when first named, had seemed, like all golden dates that promise anything definite, so immeasurably remote. When it was first announced a fortnight before that Miss Smedley was really going, the resultant ecstasies had occupied a full week, during which we blindly revelled in the contemplation and discussion of her past tyrannies, crimes, and malignities, in recalling to each other this or that insult, dishonour or physical assault, sullenly endured at a time when deliverance was not even a small star on the horizon, and in mapping out the golden days to come, with special new troubles of their own, no doubt, since this is but a work-a-day world, but at least free from one familiar scourge. The time that remained had been taken up by the planning of practical expressions of the popular sentiment. Under Edward's masterly direction, arrangements had been made for a flag to be run up over the hen-house at the very moment when the fly, with Miss Smedley's boxes on top and the grim oppressor herself inside, began to move off down the drive. 3 brass cannons set on the brow of the sunk fence were to proclaim our deathless sentiments in the ears of the retreating foe. The dogs were to wear ribbons, and later, but this depended on our powers of evasiveness and dissimulation, there might be a small bonfire, with a cracker or two, if the public funds could bear the unwanted strain. I was awakened by Harold digging me in the ribs, and "She's going today" was the morning hymn that scattered the clouds of sleep. Strange to say, it was with no corresponding jubilation of spirits that I slowly realized the momentous fact. Sorry, my throat's just being a little bit weird. Where were we? Oh, yes. Indeed, as I dressed, a dull, disagreeable feeling that I could not define grew within me, something like a physical bruise. Harold was evidently feeling it too, for after repeating, "She's going today," in a tone more befitting the litany, he looked hard in my face for direction as to how the situation was to be taken. But I crossly bade him look sharp and say his prayers and not bother me. What could this gloom portend, that on a day of days like the present seemed to hang my heavens with black? Down at last and out in the sun, we found Edward before us, swinging on a gate, and chanting a farmyard ditty in which all the beasts appear in due order, jargoning in their several tongues, and every verse begins with the couplet. "Now, my lads, come with me out in the morning early." Excuse me, I really don't know what's going on with my throat there. The fateful exodus of the day had evidently slipped his memory entirely. I touched him on the shoulder. "She's going today," I said. Edward's carol subsided like a water tap turned off. "So she is," he replied, and got down at once off the gate, and we returned to the house without another word. Sorry, my throat is really being weird right now. Let me just have a quick sip of water. I know it's not the best time since we're right at the end of the episode anyway, but my throat was really getting a bit odd. So anyway, we have pretty much come to the end of the episode at this point, in all honesty. We're definitely getting closer and closer to being ready to decide if we're just going to read the Iliad next, or if we are going to put another poll up to see what we want to read next. Because there's only about 40 pages-ish, 40 odd pages left. But yeah, anyway. Thank you very much for joining me today. As always, No, hang on. What is it? I've completely forgot what I normally say. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon or night. No matter what time of day it is, I hope you all have a wonderful one of it. And as always, we will be back tomorrow for more of The Longing. Goodbye.